Presentation for you, Julie. All right, it is 7:03 on Tuesday, February 1st, and we are going to begin our board meeting. We'd like to, first of all, excuse Karen Winder. President Winder is online with us tonight. She is not feeling well, so she chose to join us remotely. So we are going to recognize everybody who is here, starting with Karen online.
Clark Nelson.
Chris Wynn.
Connie Burgess.
Julie Jackson.
Terry Bodden.
Rich Nye.
David Garrett.
And Nicole McDermott. We are going to get started with, first of all, recognizing the representatives we have here from our employee groups. We'd like to recognize them. I know GEA is here. Would you guys stand up and whoever's here?
So, Michelle Jones, GEA President, along with my board members, Katie, and our Executive Director, Jessica White.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And we have our
Julie Kaplan from the Office Professionals Association, with Dana Breeze and Catherine Winder.
thank you for being here. Do we have anybody else? Did I see anyone else? Oh, thank you. Thank you. And did I miss anybody? All right, and I don't see any elected officials, unless I missed someone. Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and do our Pledge of Allegiance, and Brandon Moore, who is the principal at Frost Elementary, is going to come up and lead us in that. You can clap.
Please rise. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Moore. All right, our reverence today is by Spring Lane Elementary Choir. We're going to turn the time over to Ben to introduce them.
Yeah, and I'm just double checking that our Principal Lamson isn't here to make that introduction. And if he is not, then I get to do it. We're very excited as we kind of reverted back with the Omicron variant to a digital version of our reverence. So I'm going to get that set up here for you just a second. Make sure that Karen can participate. So board members, you do not need to move seats tonight. Hopefully this will play flawlessly for us. Nope.
And very appropriate as today, for those of you who don't know, is Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year. So thank you. Will you extend our thanks to them for Spring Lane Elementary Choir? We are going to go on to recognitions. Ben, we're going to turn the time over to you. This is our pandemic resilient schools that he's going to.
And I'm very excited to present to you Dr. Joan Bramble, who will be describing this recognition and what it is about and recognizing the respective schools.
Okay, thank you, Board, for the opportunity to acknowledge some school teams tonight.
Joan, hold on a minute.
You there, Karen? Go ahead.
Happy birthday,
Thank
Joan.
you, Karen.
Thanks for being here on your birthday.
Sure.
Karen, did you want to sing happy birthday too, or?
So thank you, Board, for the opportunity to acknowledge some school teams tonight that stood out last year in their efforts to provide great instruction during a year that had many disruptions due to the pandemic. In the past years, our top schools, based on median growth percentile, or MGP, have been recognized with a trophy. Because we don't have MGPs for the past year, we are instead recognizing school teams that bucked the trend of pandemic-related disruptions that typically had negative influences on academic performance. The school teams we are recognizing tonight stood out among the schools across the state in this regard and have been dubbed pandemic resilient schools for their ability to show the greatest increases in academic performance during the 2020-2021 school year. As I announce these teams, I would invite them to come forward to receive a plaque and a congratulations from the board. Our first school team from Robert Frost, 5th grade math.
Nice job, guys.
You guys come on over here, sweet center. Everybody there's great.
Say, cover me up, please.
And our Robert Frost team probably shouldn't go too far because they also, and this is really impressive, their 6th grade earned this award for ELA, math, and science. Wow.
Oh, you guys.
Our next school team, Eastwood Elementary, 5th grade math.
Come on.
And our next school, Cottonwood Elementary, 5th grade ELA. Nice job, you guys.
You guys,
Congratulations.
Our next school team is from Evergreen Junior High, 7th grade ELA. another junior high team, Eisenhower Junior, 7th grade math.
Good job, guys.
Thank you for all your work. Nice work. I'm so proud. This is huge.
And our next junior high team was from Hunter Junior, 7th grade science.
Good job, you guys.
You guys, great job. Thank you so much for all your hard work. These guys are doing a good job. Seriously. Great job, you guys.
And another junior high, Bonneville Junior. And this one is 8th grade, ELA and science.
Oh, you guys are awesome.
I love that you guys color coordinated too.
Seriously, nice colors, guys.
And next we have two high
I just
school
want to say purple is the
teams.
color of Vikings.
We have Skyline High, 9th grade, ELA. And Olympus High School, 10th grade, ELA. And thanks once again for the time to acknowledge those great teams and the efforts on behalf of all of our students last year.
Thank you so much. One more round of applause. You know, this is great that we are able to do this. Thank you, Dr. Bramble, for being here and being able to recognize this. On her birthday. On your birthday, even. We should have brought you a piece of cake. But it's, you know, we recognize that this has been a really, really tough year. And last year was, I think this year's tougher, but last year was tough and this year's tougher. And so to have this recognition and to be able to see that this is amazing that they've been able to achieve this. So thank you for recognizing that. All right, we have, am I seeing no elected officials and nobody informed us? We do have one citizen participation, but we are going to move that to the agenda item. So we are going to move on to the consent agenda. And I will entertain a motion.
I move that we bifurcate the consent agenda as follows, that we accept the consent agenda for all of the items except for the change orders that were articulated in that consent agenda, that we separate that into a separate vote.
Okay, so it's been motioned to separate out the consent agenda, separate out the change orders from the consent agenda, and to approve the consent agenda without those change orders. Do we have a second?
Is there a reason why we're moving those up?
Yeah, I'm not inclined to vote in favor of those change orders, and so I would like to vote in favor of the other consent items. And so if we could bifurcate the two, that would be great. If not, I'll make my vote accordingly.
Okay, we have a motion and a second from Terry.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
I just want to thank, on the consent agenda, we have a social emotional learning survey to go for district employees. And I just want to say thank you to the district for being able to ask the employees how we can improve and what's going good. That's all.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. We need an approval of that motion in order to do that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so it has been separated out that do we need to approve it separately? Okay, so we need to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the change orders. Am I doing that right? The motion was to approve the consent agenda with the exception of.
1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, so that passed.
Okay, so that passed. So now we need to,
Another motion for those consent items.
thank you, sorry, I'm new at this. So now we need to entertain a motion for accepting the change orders as far as on the consent agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda has been newly stated. I just made that part up, without the change orders.
We've already
Oh, we already did that.
approved the consent agenda without the change orders, so now we need to have the motion to
Oh.
approve the consent agenda portion with the change orders on it. Approve the change orders.
Oh, okay. So we're looking for a motion to approve the 4 change orders right now?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the 4 change orders.
I'll second. All right. All right. Is there any discussion to the motion?
I would just direct the reason for my desire to bifurcate the vote is some of the concerns that were expressed during the 5 o'clock meeting, and I don't think we need to necessarily rehash that. I can't get past those concerns at this point from an approval standpoint, so that was my desire to bifurcate.
Go ahead, Karen. Thank you, Karen. Any other thoughts, questions?
But I do think it's important that we recognize that as a board, we saw some things that we were concerned with.
Speak closer to the mic.
We've asked staff to work with that, and I know that they will, and so we appreciate that. So I want everyone to realize that we've learned some things and look forward to moving forward in a positive way. So.
All right. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? All right, so we've had a motion and a second. We will, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
So we have 6 ayes and 1 nay. All right. With that, no, not yet. Okay. We don't need to turn the timer on. Okay, so we are going to move on to our first reading of Article 5C, 15, Student Data Privacy Protection, and turn the time over to Doug Larson.
Board members, thank you. This is a policy that came from, actually, USBE does an internal audit of districts every year regarding their privacy policies. Dale Roberts and I noted that there were some areas of compliance that while we were in compliance, we felt like a policy would be helpful to pull together all of the areas that we need to comply with respect to data privacy and with our acquiring information from students. You might be aware of what's called the Ppra, which is a federal statute related to student data that is acquired by schools. If student data is, if the subject of student data is on what's one of 7 sensitive subjects, including religious belief, political affiliations, mental health issues, family income, those kinds of topics, then schools are not allowed to solicit that information from students without parental consent. That's part of the policy. The rest of the policy is not about acquiring student information, but protecting student information once we have it. And that is also protected under 2 federal statutes and a state statute. FERPA and COPA, and the state statute is the Utah Data Privacy Act. And this policy basically pulls together the requirements, the obligations of all of those statutes and all of those regulations into one place for ease of reference. That's really all this is. These are practices that we've been that have been part of our practice for some time, but we're now pulling them together into one place so that parents know what we are doing with respect to collecting information and protecting information once it's been collected. If you have any other questions about the policy, I'm happy to answer.
So just to clarify, is this a brand new policy or is this pulling certain ones together and just compiling them in one?
Great question. It is a brand new policy.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So does that mean that there is redundancy in other policies?
Yep, there is redundancy in one other administrative memorandum. And that administrative memorandum, once we have a new policy in place, will no longer be necessary and will be eliminated.
Oh, so I was thinking that this was like, this language was, for the most part, already policy, but it was just in this one and this one and this one. But no, like we've created a whole new policy, but brought some from one.
That's right.
Is that
So
correct?
the other policy was specifically about FERPA, and it had to do with FERPA language itself.
Yeah.
So there's a whole section in this policy that deals specifically with FERPA, and there are some similarities, some overlap, some redundancy with that administrative memoranda. But there are other areas, including the PPRA, COPA, and the Utah Data Privacy Act, that we did not have in policy. We relied on the statutes themselves, and so we pulled those into policy so that it would be all there for ease of reference.
Okay.
So do we meet all the requirements as set forth by the state board?
Yes, sir, we do. And in fact, this was once again prompted by the state board's internal audit and some areas that they had directed us on with respect to the data collection portion of this policy. And so this puts us well within compliance.
And I move that we accept as first reading the student data and privacy protection policy.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, do we have discussion on the motion? Karen, do you have anything?
Oh,
Sorry, we have a motion and a second, and All right.
I might mention one additional thing, sorry, on this policy, just for the record, that this policy does require that we have input from our community, from our patrons. This policy is actually now being reviewed by our district community council members, and we will be receiving feedback on that, on the policy from them. And if we get any feedback regarding changes or anything else, I'll bring those to the board in the next reading.
Okay. So is the next reading going to be a final
Yes.
approval?
It can be, absolutely. I would see no reason for it to go beyond a second reading, but if you would like to discuss it for a third reading, I'd be happy to put it on the calendar for a third.
So I don't know how you all feel, but if we're going to get changes from the district community council, I'd like to see those maybe before,
Sure.
if we have those in enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I think it would be, that way we can see where they would like to change it and be able to.
And if I don't get those in time, then I will bring it to you with a recommendation for a third reading if you haven't had an opportunity to fully vet those recommendations from district community council members.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions, discussion? All right, so we have a motion and a second to, let me say this right, to approve Article 5C, 15, Student Data and Privacy Protection Policy as a first reading. All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, it is passed unanimously.
I just want to say that's quite a policy, so good job.
Thank you.
Just checking sound real quick for our online broadcast. Karen, can you hear us okay? Thank you.
I'm trying, sorry. All right, thank you so much, Doug. We're going to call you back later, but we'll excuse you for now. We're going to move on to our action item. First action item is our boundary study proposal, and we're going to invite Steve Hogan to come up. The amazing and wonderful Steve Hogan. I'm biased, I know.
Can I take you everywhere we go for open houses and meetings and everything? That would be great. I've got it. Which one? Which one? Okay. Got it. Okay. Hello again. My name is Steve Hogan. I'm the Director of Planning and Boundaries, for those that don't know, and Board President at home. Again, President Winder, if you can't hear me, just let me know, and I'll try to speak directly into the mic and as well as I can. I feel your pain. I was there last week, having to do a lot of things from home. I am back. In fact, today's my first day back, and glad to do it. And no more COVID now. I just have boundary issues. And so, sorry, that was a quick planning and boundaries joke. So,
Will you be here all night?
yes, I'll be here all year, I think. So, let's jump right in. We're back to maybe red button, Ben? No, there we go. Got it. Thank you. Two quick agenda items, not really quick, but the two agenda items are the Van Winkle 7th East Corridor Study and the Cottonwood Network Boundary Study. Now, I put these at the beginning, and I want to give a preface this with saying we might need to come back to something, but this year is a little unique in that you'll notice, board members, you've probably already noticed that these two boundaries, or potential boundary studies, I should say at this point, have a lot of overlap. Geographically especially, they really are covering a lot of the same area. However, simply put, because the goals of these studies, potential studies, are quite different in our mind, or the minds of the pack, we decided to separate them at this point into two different studies. Now, as we look at this tonight, if anyone thinks differently, certainly let us know. But that's why, if anyone was wondering why they're two separate studies, despite covering largely the same area, hopefully that is answered for you as we go, and we can come back to that point as needed, okay? Quick reminder, as I was here a few weeks ago, I talked about the boundary study process. Here we are in step one. at the end of step one. This is a couple of months, again, from December to February, and here in February, we are doing just that, and that is, as the PAC, I'm representing the PAC and making a proposal for the boundary studies for this year. So again, I always like to remind everyone there is a process, there is a policy, and we're in the beginning of that. The next couple of slides are really reminders. Now, the board, I believe, is pretty familiar with these, but they're foundational reminders specifically to this study, I believe. We've talked about small school concerns quite a bit. That's a name we still use, but I really like to emphasize as much as possible, and we'll do so many, many times going forward, when we say small school concerns, it's not just enrollment size, but you can see in parentheses there, schools with less than 3 teachers per grade level. We've seen over and over, the data has shown us anecdotally and otherwise that when schools get too small, quite frankly, there are a lot of concerns that come up. And so I'm not going over each of these bullet points. I'll be glad to stop at any point if anyone wants to go over these again. I've made specific presentations to the board on these issues and other groups, but this part is foundational to where we're going with this, at least this first boundary study, okay? That is the next slide, simply going over a few more. I think there are maybe 10 or 11 or 12 points on these 2 slides, although if we stopped, we could probably come up with 20 to 25, but these are some of the main points. So with that reminder, and let's jump right into, the first proposal. And it is what we're calling at this point the Van Winkle 7th East Corridor Boundary Study. That maybe is a little bit of a mouthful. We always have the option of tweaking that a little bit if we need to be more specific. But we decided to make it a little more broad, at least in the beginning, to be as accurate as possible. We can see on the slide illustrated there that the dark line going through the middle is representing the Van Winkle corridor, which turns into 7th East and heading north there. That is the general area that we are looking at in this study. It's not necessarily confined to just those schools that the line is touching. That's why we like to call it a corridor study. It gives us a little more flexibility going into it. Now, you can see obviously the red circle around Spring Lane and Twin Peaks Elementaries. We believe that at least initially, this is where the heart of the study will begin. There's no secret, probably among this group, this board, anyone listening, anyone in those 2 communities especially, that there's low enrollment or small school concerns, or should we say less than 3 teachers per grade level at some of those schools. I think, to be honest, Twin Peaks has come up more than the others. Twin Peaks is currently around 225 students, give or take a handful. But when I checked last week, we were in that 225 to 230 range. That's total students, sped and all, according to the principal. So that's, and it's a challenge. And it's been on our radar, quite honestly, for a couple of years. And but it is a challenge. Now, Spring Lane next to it, directly next to it, they share boundaries, is a little higher. It is in that 280 to 290 range. And they're both 2 of the lower elementaries in the district. And that is where we would begin the conversation of this study. Now, to be quite frank, some people have asked me for over a year now, but more so recently, and even in PAC meeting, Steve, is this a closure study? Are we saying this is Twin Peaks Spring Lane closure study? And I can tell you absolutely no, not yet. I would emphasize in any study that everything is on the table when we begin, up to and including closures, but I think it would be disingenuous and, quite frankly, not good practice if we just started with maybe the most extreme option is closure. We're not hiding from the fact that we've talked about this before. for several years. We've discussed our consulting with Davis Demographics and what their recommendations are. But what we can say is that it's there on the table along with boundary changes, along with program changes, along with you name it. And I will say that for any study, even the next one we talk about. When we first meet, when I say we, it's usually it's Ben and I, when we meet with school community councils, hold open houses, whatever the group we're meeting with, we like to just take any recommendations. Now, some recommendations we can dismiss pretty quickly. Someone's going to say, hey, let's annex Murray or Canyons District. That one's probably not going to happen. So we can get rid of some of those pretty quickly. But if we can talk about other options, let's talk about them. Let's look at all of them. Let's vet those and look at the data. And then we try to go through that. And I come back to this board. And in the next couple of months, we have some real good recommendations from the PAC and through feedback in the district.
I just want to make sure on this map, the blue on the east of Spring Lane is Cottonwood Elementary, and the green just above that is Howard R. Driggs. Have I got that right?
I believe that's right. I don't have my
Yeah.
glasses, but I believe that's right.
I'm looking at the principal over here. He has it memorized.
That should be right. Okay. So again, just to rehash, that's what we'll start with. But hopefully we'll have some solid recommendations coming up in the next few months after the study. Now, again, the goal here, the goal of this study, as opposed to the other, is simply seeking solutions to these small school concerns. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, that's what we're going to come back with some recommendations over the next couple of months. I will also say that most of the time we've developed a practice, I'll say, over the last couple of years of taking each of these studies individually and making a decision of whether we go forward with the study. The board does one at a time. We're certainly welcome to do that. Although, because there's some overlap here, if anyone's wants to wait and hear both of these, then we can certainly, kind of come back to this or decide both at the same time. But that's just a reminder that in the past, we've tried to decide one at a time, then move on. But any concerns either way?
Yeah, can you clarify that? I'm just not sure I understood, and maybe that was my fault. When you say decide one at a time, what are we referring to?
So I think when I first started years ago, this is my 8th year doing boundary studies, and sometimes we would have 3 or 4 studies going on at the same time, and I would give the entire presentation, and then we would go back and say, all right, are we approving all of these studies, or 1 or 2, or A and C, or C and D? Then we started saying, you know what, let's take one at a time. So in other words, at this point, we would stop and say, we can discuss this and approve. The board can make a recommendation to proceed with this study, or wait and hear the entire presentation and then go back and decide one at a time.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity then to make a comment. What strikes me as a concern is that it is just one study for the elementary schools. The small school challenge that you refer to is not unique to Spring Lane and Twin Peaks. As indicated by the Davis demographic study that was expensive, it's pervasive throughout the district. And so my concern is that anytime a boundary study is undertaken, anytime boundary changes are made, there's a significant ripple effect far beyond those individual schools that might be the subject of it. And we can see, obviously, there's several schools in the map that could be impacted and part of the study. But I think it goes even beyond those that might be visible on the map. And so as just kind of a general principle, I'm concerned that our small schools concerns and our effort to address that is not more comprehensive on a district-wide basis rather than one subset or one or two communities or schools at a time.
You bet. I'll give you at least a partial answer to that.
Please.
I certainly don't disagree with anything there. Again, going back to what we've known for several years at least, and our Davis demographic study, that was our third-party consultant telling us, at least according to them, yeah, it's not hard to look at the numbers and see that there are more than, quite frankly, 6, 7, 8 or more schools that are concerned, at least. I think the PAC's recommendation of looking at this one was twofold. One, it's been on the radar for several years as a more obvious one. We had this, in fact, something we had thought about taking on a couple of years ago, then COVID hit, and we were all concerned about what would that do to our overall numbers. And we feel like, okay, now who knows how long COVID will be here, but at least we feel like we're getting on more solid, settled ground with enrollment. And so I think that's, at the same time, though, it was a matter of discussion. How many do we take on? And it was settled at 1. Certainly, the PAC is open to discussion on, or your recommendations on how to proceed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That is my recommendation. Obviously, I'm one voice of the board and only one, but it's, and I appreciate and want to acknowledge that there are certain regulatory constraints that may come into play in terms of open houses that have to occur, and as you increase the number of schools that are impacted, those requirements only grow, and that can be cumbersome. But I don't think we should let that take away from the fact that we as a board have a responsibility to have a long-term vision for the district, and that these kinds of studies have to be comprehensive in nature and not be piecemeal, for lack of a better word. I'm very reticent of the impacts of these kinds of piecemeal studies and decisions as they fail to take into account much broader ripple effects throughout broader communities and not just 1 or 2 schools at a time.
Christina, comment? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
You can go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. Go ahead.
Okay, so my comment is similar. I'm not familiar with some of these schools as being in the district not too long on the board. So my concern is also, I don't want to overlook something that we could be missing. I think it needs to be the open houses and well attended by board members, especially ones like me who are not familiar with those areas. And I do echo that some of what Karen's saying, that if I don't know the area, I don't feel good about voting on anything for that school without really knowing what it entails. And I understand what you're saying, Clark, because it will cause a ripple. It will change many things in that area, not just maybe those schools involved. So I think we can just be wise to look at those as we're studying it. And then as they come up, maybe, we move our focus onto other parts of maybe what needs to be looked at, so.
Thanks, Chris. Terry, you have a comment?
Yeah, I agree with both Karen and Chris on that. Of course, small school concerns is not anything new to us, and we've had that for several years. We've actually had to close some schools in other parts of the district, and I agree that we as a board need to have opportunity to get to know these communities more by attending open houses and open meetings that they're having as communities. So I see what you're saying, Clark. I respect that. I think to do a comprehensive, we have a lot of areas in our district, in all sides of the district, and that we have small school concerns with. And so I think comprehensive would be overwhelming for the district as a whole, us as a board, and I like the idea of breaking this up. And there will be other areas that we look at, that we've already looked at, and we'll look at in the future. So.
Thanks, Terry. Julie?
I wish that we could have it both ways. I'm with you, Clark. I feel like I understand that there could be a little bit, maybe if there was vision on the whole, maybe it could get us somewhere good. I totally appreciate that. And I don't think that there, I guess what I want to say is I would love to try to think of ways that we could both have vision and understand nuance on the small scale, because like I am so concerned about, this is my first boundary study. I'm so concerned about it. I've like set aside time to make sure that I can spend enough time with these communities, because I'm really nervous to make sure that I'm nervous I'm going to miss a nuance, And so that's a huge priority, but I wonder if there's a way that we could also somehow have a bigger, broader vision, and I don't have an answer for it, but I'd love it if we all could think about it.
Connie?
So, on a map, these schools look close, and the boundaries are gigantic there, but we don't know the population of those schools surrounding them. It's hard for me to visualize right now what you can do to help these schools, so I'm interested in that. But
There is some of that, and that's part of that overlap I mentioned where it shows those others. But at the same time, I appreciate what you're saying. Quite frankly, I hesitate to get too far into each school individually tonight, because we're really going to dig into that when we go forward.
Right.
But yeah, it's something we'll have to look at.
yeah, and I can see where, when we closed one of the.
We had Sandburg and Ochre Hills.
No, when we closed the East Side School, just the one that was there on 10th East, years and years ago.
Yes.
Hillside.
Hillview,
Libby Edwards, Canyon View.
So we did make the boundaries for these other schools huge. They have wonderful homes there, and how long it would take to, build. I know we never get the same population back, but I appreciate your willingness to do this. Looks like a horrendous job.
It's not the most fun part of what I do, but necessary sometimes.
Thanks.
Well, Twin Peaks is asked.
If the board is,
So I just want to add my thoughts. Clark, I understand what you're saying, and I do appreciate that. As you spoke, though, you said that there's a ripple effect. And having gone through this also in my area, there is a ripple effect. And I think it does take a couple years to be able to see where that ripple ends. And that's why when we do it, to me at least, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that as, okay, we've got to wait for the dust to settle to see where we need to go next, because things that we thought would happen have not happened, or things that we never expected have happened. And so doing the whole thing all together not only frightens people, but it, I think we're not, we have to be very cognizant that there are ripple effects and that we have to see those kind of get ironed out in the process, number one. Number two, we do have to be, this does take a lot of time. I know a lot of time to not just go to the meetings, but also a lot of time, I know Steve spends a lot of time looking at the data and looking at, okay, which area would go over here? Well, would that make sense? Is there a busing route? Is there, what's the safe walking route? He looks into all of those things. If you can imagine doing that with the entire district in 1 year, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's pretty amazing, I will say, but do you
Can I
think
speak to that just for a moment here? Because I did speak to Board Member Nelson about this extensively and what it would take. We currently under state statute have a handful of meetings requirements above and beyond just the 2 public hearings required for each closure or boundary change or adjustment. So those would just be the 2 the board are required to participate in. A part of our process and procedure that's built out in our policy is at least 4 meetings, 2 with school community council and 2 public hearing, open houses as you would. So considering the vast nature of our small school situation, which depending on your perspective is in between 12 to 14 schools district-wide, we're looking at over 60 plus meetings that would need to take place. So is that possible? Yes, it is possible. I think it would require at least a 2, possibly 3-year study. When I talked to you on the phone, I was thinking more like 2 years, but just looking at the amount of time and requirements just to study. If you look in our policy at the over dozen different parameters that we look at a bare minimum for each of those closures, looking at bus routes, transportation, walkable communities, safe walking routes, neighborhood schools, the things that you have told us that you want our schools to be about and be accessible to. There's just a lot of parameters here, and I think we would want to have a vision of you, as you've indicated there. But I don't think it would be feasible within even possibly a 2-year study to do that. I also worry about, these are emotional decisions, despite the fact that the board is making some of these decisions based on what we feel as an administration is in the best interest of students. And we make that recommendation to you. A lot of people don't look at a school closure or a boundary study based on financial sense or the well-being of the student. They look at it with the precious memories that are associated with their participation in those neighborhood schools. And closing a school is a very difficult proposition, and closing multiple schools in 1 year is, as we've done before as a board and as an administration, is challenging as well. So if the district would like, I want to emphasize how important I think it is that we do have a vision of what we want to accomplish. And he stated a little of that here. We want to make sure that our students are receiving the best opportunities and educational experience that they can possibly have. And at the same time, I think we would be remiss if we were trying to do all of that all at once. Could we possibly do more additional studies as part of this group? Absolutely, we could. And if the board directs us to do so, we're happy to take that study under consideration. But undertaking all of those schools, again, I would recommend, if we chose to do so, that we would extend the length and period of time of the study just to make sure it was even feasible to go through the logistical requirements, if that makes sense. And now I'm rambling, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Ben. So you said that sometimes we do take a vote on these separately. My suggestion would be that we finish out the entire thing because these do overlap, and so we have additional information that comes with this. So if that's okay, let's go ahead and finish this, and then we will vote on them separately.
Great. And I agree. I think this year that's probably more appropriate. So we're going to leave that one for a second and transition to the next recommendation. There we go. And that is what we're calling so far the Cottonwood Network Boundary Study. Now simply, this is just a screenshot of most of our high school boundaries. You can see there in the yellow, kind of from the southeast to the northwest direction. Again, the yellow is the Cottonwood High School boundary, which is, again, largely the Cottonwood Network boundary. So if we zoom in, not zoom in, but just look specifically, again, highlighting that area without the other boundaries, just to make sure we understand what that area is. Now, I did leave Cottonwood High School down there just for context, but of course, all the other schools are not on there, but I will list the other schools in just a moment. But again, just for visual context. Again, a little bit of perspective. These are, I think, fairly recent numbers. Maybe those are from maybe back in the fall, but they're still, I think, appropriate. You can see Cottonwood Senior High there at around 1,600, if I remember right. They're just below 1,600 now, but in comparison to the others. Now, comparison is, we have to always be careful with comparisons because they can be misleading at times, but at least we can see that what some of the concerns, and again, this is not a brand new concern that just came to us a few weeks or even a few months ago. This is something that's been building for quite a while, I believe. But you can also look at, though, if you compare them to perhaps Olympus and Skyline, also are two other east side, if you will, high schools that are a little lower in that range, but at least over 2,000. And Cottonwood is the only high school that is less than 2,000. And of course, we have some that are a lot higher than that. Granger High. Let me just simply mention, a few of you have asked this, and I'll repeat this part about Granger High. And the reason we have it included, at least specifically Granger High in that study this year. There are a couple of things going on there that we're trying to get a handle on in that area that we want to make sure of before we jump. One of the ones is, I don't know if we can wait this long, but we know from history that when a new school comes online, so of course we have Skyline and we have Cypress coming up. Cypress in particular, there's a lot of buzz about that school. There's a lot of growth out there, but I'm hearing a lot of buzz about people. Just like when Granger opened, it changed Granger. More students came back to that school that hadn't been there for years. We're hearing some of that same conversation in the community about Cypress. I'm a little concerned about jumping too quickly about changing boundaries if we can avoid it before Cypress High opens because of that fact. I don't want to change boundaries, and then, oops, we went too quickly and now Cypress has 3,500 students or more. So that's one issue. There's a couple of other things we're looking at as far as the economy and how that's impacting people and homes and doubling up, special permits and some other data. So that's just a very, very quick overview of just to let you know that I'm very aware of the numbers at Granger High, and it is definitely on the radar, but perhaps some of the reasons we're not there yet.
Would you mind addressing the same issue about the Skyline network? And I mean, since we're proposing looking at the Cottonwood High network and the Skyline High building is being built, and there could be also some dominoes. I feel like I understand and have a satisfactory answer to that question, but I think there are a lot of people who would like to hear a little bit about that. Would you talk about it?
So generally speaking, just want to make sure I understand that a new school attracting more students?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's been many studies done about that, and there's not a study that says, hey, a new school is all of a sudden going to have 10% more, or 5% more, or any hard number. It really does depend on the community the school is in. But there is just something psychological and something about human nature that when you walk into a new building, it feels good, it looks good, and some people do enough to say, well, that's where I want to go to school now. So there's just something human nature there. Now, Skyline's in a little different position, we believe, from our history, to say that they might get a bit of a bump from that. We're not sure how much, but the bump we don't anticipate will be as significant as we saw, say, at Granger or what we might see at Cypress, because they're already getting what I would consider a significant number from Salt Lake District and other parts of our own district now.
I would just add that it's hard to envision a circumstance where their population would decline after the building is completed.
I also just want to, like, if I can add.
Please.
Some have said, why don't you just wait until all the dust has settled on that? And to me, the reason not to wait is because if anything, when the dust settles, it's going to mean a weaker Cottonwood, because they continue to lose population and we have no time to waste. And so, yes, maybe if there wasn't this urgency for Cottonwood, maybe we would wait for the dust to settle. But we know that when the dust does settle, Cottonwood will probably, most likely, be in a worse situation than it is now. And so thus the urgency.
I would indicate, can I take that? That our committee feels the same way. We're not sure where that's going to end up, but we do know that there are currently 116 students who are boundary to Taylorsville that were probably part of that original boot that are still attending Cottonwood High. And it's safe to say that the majority of those will peter out at some point in time, and that leaves you around close to 1,500 students. And then looking at that construction process. So we don't know if that's accurate or not, but I think it's a logical assumption that we should at least investigate and as part of a study, right? Did I miss anything?
No, perfect. I was just going to say we agree with the latter part of that comment, and that is we're close enough to the skyline completion, at least close enough. We feel confident in the data we've seen over there historically, and you're right, we've reached a point where we at least need to consider a study. That's why we're here tonight to propose this.
I have a quick question, and maybe Clark could even answer this or clarify it. I know that Ames is housed over there at Cottonwood. Some of those students do attend classes at Cottonwood. They're not included in this number, are they?
That is correct. They are not included in this number.
So what is the, like, when you do combine, are they counted in any significant way towards that population because they do have some classes, particularly the elective classes, where they fill those out? How are they counted, or how does that work out with that?
Typically, most of the time, they're not counted at all. My understanding is I think they would have to be in more than 2 classes, and that's difficult to do, more than 2 classes enrolled. But a couple of things. The last time I looked up Ames's charter, and wisely, I think, part of the reason for that was their charter said that they could only have so many students from Cottonwood or in their boundary, a certain percentage. If I remember right, it was somewhere between 8 and 10%. So there were about 450-ish Ames students. I can double check that with them.
When I talked to the principal, it was way down this year.
For the total numbers?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he said there were maybe 200 to 300 had applied this year.
And I think there was less than 40 of those total were Cottonwood High School boundaried students. So, and now we have a few more, maybe another, if I remember right, 20 to 30 that are Granite District boundaried students from other areas. But does that answer your question?
So you're saying most of them are not Granite District boundary students?
I think Rick, who serves on the Ames board, could help us with that question as well.
Part of Ames's charter is someone from Granite's executive team will sit on their board. They have about 500 students, the majority of which take 1 class at Cottonwood. I don't have a percentage, but a high percentage of them take at least 1 class from Cottonwood.
Board President, Board Vice Chair. And to that point, though, as part of this study is to say with the Ames charter that is at Cottonwood, the school's enrollment per se, the physical capacity has to be taken into question, and right now it has 2,100 students on it. So maybe contextually answering your question, it really is about where are they counted, and I would say even so much as in the use of the facility that would also inform that, right? So if you consider that, they're right up, 2,100 students. But we need to take a look at the capacity of the school, what that network feeder pattern might look like. I mean, it's still very much part of the equation, but we can't lose sight that yeah, physical space is being occupied by about 500 students as part of that charter agreement.
I add a little more context to that, Superintendent. That's true that the numbers have been as high as 500 from Ames, 125 per grade level per class. In terms of physical capacity, when the ninth graders came to Cottonwood, that was certainly part of that consideration. And there was a fair amount of, whether it be anecdotal or proven out in specific numbers, Cottonwood at times in the past has housed close to 3,000 students. So I don't think there's a physical capacity concern in terms of balancing out the number of Granite School District students in the building, even including the Ames students in those numbers. The other thing I would like to add is just from an extracurricular or elective standpoint, yeah, there are some students that do cross over and take classes. I think it would be helpful as part of the study, and I'm sure it's in your mind as well, to understand exactly how those numbers bear out. But from an extracurricular standpoint, just specifically athletics, the way those charters, or at least that specific charter is written, is that Ames students, while they have the opportunity offered to them to participate on Cottonwood athletic teams, that is not their only option. They may, because those students as part of the charter come from all over the valley, they can go back to their home neighborhood, so to speak, and participate with that high school that they live closest to, or that they're technically boundaried with, and that happens often. So just additional context that I wished to describe.
And I know that happens often, maybe with sports, but there are other ones. That's why I mentioned the classes. There are some classes there that I'm aware of that rely heavily on Ames enrollment for some of the elective classes. So that's why I feel like it is an important part of that study.
And there are other aspects of the, like, clubs and things like that, there are programs that have a hard time staying afloat, that only pull from that 1,600,
Ben, you had something?
I was just going to point out, these are all excellent points, and a study does not commit us to one direction or another, just as a reminder for the public who might be listening. And we have the opportunity to delve a little bit deeper into these issues, and before we get to a point where we need to formally commit to a direction, right? And so a study just doesn't hurt us in this situation. It gives us a lot of tools at our disposal to dig deeper into these critical issues and how they're impacting our students.
Yeah, I think one point of emphasis that the community from Cottonwood would like to hear in that regard is, while the small school from an elementary standpoint, while recognizing that doesn't necessarily mean closure or consolidation, but that even lesser is the case with Cottonwood High School. It's more of a rebalancing type of an issue rather than considering even a closure remotely possible at this point in time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would believe
Yes.
I would believe that very much is the case. I would say, unlike a small elementary school where program and pedagogy can be compromised, that's less the case at a high school. As that enrollment decreases, as you think of many other high schools in the state that are much smaller, that are offering still a fantastic program in terms of courses, curriculum, content, and just breadth and depth that's there. So it's less, in terms of that small school, less articulated at the high school or secondary level. But those impacts are realized to a greater extent at the elementary.
And directly to the point that I mentioned in the beginning, and that is one of the other reasons that even though geographically these overlap, they really are quite different, and that's one of the big reasons.
To the 2 points that are just made, this is about having a vision of what those east side schools look like, right? And so this study will help us flesh that out and determine exactly what we want from those schools and how they'll function within Granite School District.
Yes, I was just going to ask if you had anything. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. So we have 2 studies then that are on our agenda, the Van Winkle 7th East Corridor Study and the Cottonwood Network Boundary Study. Do you have any questions, or I will entertain a motion?
Motion, do we have to make a motion on this? Or are we just?
It's an action item.
Huh?
It is an action item.
That's
so
an
yes.
action item? Okay, excuse me.
Just to clarify that, in accordance with our policy, the board must approve the areas we study.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2 proposed boundary studies.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, no discussion or questions, so we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you, board. See you soon.
All right. We are going to invite our school calendar committee to come up for the school calendar discussion. I want to say thanks, first of all, for, I know this is a lot of work, and we've given you some different hoops to jump through, and we appreciate you guys being willing to do it and to go through all this work. I know this is a lot to look at and slash through, so we appreciate everything that you guys have done for this. So with that, we will turn it over.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Craig Stopper. I'm one of the secondary directors, and I'm here to present with you and our chair, Tina West, the results and not the results, I guess, more the survey feedback that we received after presenting the second survey to our community. So if you can go to the next slide. Oh, is it me? I'll do that. Just for a little bit of history, what takes place is in October, we offer the opportunity for feedback from our community on what they feel like is most important when we look at the calendar. We take that information back to our calendar committee, and we come up with options for board approval to be able to receive more feedback and then potentially to have you adopt a specific calendar. This particular slide gives us some of that survey ranking of what the community felt like was most important. And you can see that using this scale, they're asked to assign a number next to each option in order of preference, with the number 1 being the least important and the number 6 being the most important. We then take that data and weight order it so that you have some results of what the community feels like is most important. Looking at these results, a long winter break was most important, down to having a fall break was the least important as far as those results. Our next slide talks about the next survey. So we took those options of calendars that you adopted to have more survey information. And this is what took place with that survey. It was made available in both English and Spanish. The survey was open to our district on the district website from January 3rd through the 21st. The survey was sent to parents, employees, and administrators on January 3rd, asking administrators to distribute that information to students and have them vote. And then a reminder was set out on January 12th to our parents and our employees. There were some changes to the survey that you requested to find out more information about. A link to the information from the general calendar survey was shared in October of 2020 and was available, which best describes you, either a student, parent, employee, or a parent and employee. The next question, which high school network do you belong to? Then there was a question that was asked is, which is more important to you in the district calendar, having equal days in terms 1 or term 2, or ending second quarter prior to that winter break? So we'll share with you that results because that made a difference on each of the options that were made available for them to give feedback. Next was, which do you prefer, starting later in August and going into school in June, or starting earlier in August and getting out in May? And then finally, sharing a calendar comparison between drafts A and B, and then which calendar option do you prefer, and then specifically, why did you choose the one that you preferred, so that we could give you that feedback as well. To give you a little bit of information about the results, We asked them to rate what they were or to identify what they were. 5% of our students were, 5% of the survey were students, 60% were parents, 27% were employees, and 8% were both parents and employees. Down at the very bottom slide, it does show that we had 8,183 respondents for this calendar, for the 23-24 calendar, which was more than almost any other year other than the 2022.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
This is a math question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but what is the parent-to-employee ratio in our district? Like, what should we expect as far as do you know?
As far as those that should respond?
Like, should we be expecting 60% of our responses to be from parents and 30% to be from employees? Is that about, like, how many parents do we have? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
It does. Well, it does to me. And I would say this ratio is pretty common.
So this is pretty reflective of the demographics that we surveyed.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to understand that our employees are very engaged in these issues. And so oftentimes they're also parents. And so we probably have a higher rate of employees that would participate who are also parents as well, because they're part of two stakeholder groups, right?
Okay, thank you.
The next slide asked students and parents to identify which network they came from. You can see that the largest percentage is not applicable because that was, of course, that 27% that are parents, and/or we did have 119 that chose not to respond to that. We had just under 15% respond from both Olympus and Skyline Network, 11% from Taylorsville, all the way down to about 7% from a couple of our networks. So that was where the most respondents came from.
Okay, looking at the input we received regarding question 1, which was, which is more important to you, having equal days in term 1 and 2 or ending second quarter prior to winter break, you can see that equal days in terms was about 43% input, and then ending prior to winter break was about 57%. Additionally, you can see how the different groups gave their input, with the parents definitely liking to end term 2 by winter break. The employees were tied. Some liked equal terms and days, some liked term 2. The parent-employee group was quite similar to the employee group, and I think we see that throughout the data. And then the students absolutely want to end term 2 by winter break, probably so they can relax. Additional input that we solicited was, do you prefer starting later in August or going to school in June, or starting earlier in August and getting out in May? And you can see that 37% likes to start later in August, but getting out in May is 63%. And then again, there's how the different groups gave their input, with the parents wanting to end by May, largely supportive, as well as the employees. The parent-employee group was a little bit closer, but still definitely strong in ending by May, and the students absolutely want out of school by the end of May.
I just wanted to speak on the last slide where it had the students who are really pushing for the end of the term to be before the end of before Christmas or winter break. I just want to make sure, like, I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't know that you meant it this way or anything, but they're also like forgetting everything in time for finals. So it's not just about them wanting a break. Like, those guys are thinking specifically about their learning when they give that data. So I just want to make sure that we're feeling the weight of that voice, because I'm hearing it from them. I get back and I have finals week and I don't remember anything. So just wanted to mention that.
And I didn't mean to make light of that. That's absolutely the case, Julie. Yes,
I knew you
yes,
didn't mean that.
yes. So then the overall input showed that option A was at just over 55%, and option B was just under 45%, with the parents giving the largest percentage at 59% for option A. Employee group was close on both of them. The parent-employee group, interestingly enough, liked option B, and then the students were quite close in their input. And then we break it down. We thought it would be interesting for you to see how the different networks gave their input based on whether they liked option A or option B on the draft calendars. And then we take the comments and read all of those. And we did ask them this time, what do you like about the option that you chose? And so for option A, what they liked was that it's out by Memorial Day. There's an equal distribution of breaks. The term ends before winter break. School starts on a Monday. They liked the number of days off before Christmas. There's a shorter winter break. Spring recess is attached to Easter. Fall break is earlier and aligns to other districts. There is a longer summer break, and the emergency closure day is not over spring recess. For option B, their preferences, what they said that they liked, those who selected option B said they liked the longer winter break. They liked the first week of January off, which is a part of the winter break. School starts later in August, and that's actually by one day. I just wanted you to know that. It goes later in the year into June. They liked the beginning and ending dates. There are consecutive days off. That fall recess was later. That spring recess is later, and they like that for better weather. That there are better testing. It's better for testing schedules. And there were actually a couple of comments on the solar eclipse aligns with spring break on option B, and they liked that. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Can we get a plaque for those science teachers that somehow enabled our patrons to say that the solar eclipse aligns with spring break? I think that's awesome.
I thought that would be interesting. So when we were here in November, there was a conversation about how many days and can we find any days. So the first drafts that we brought to you board had, I believe, 13 days difference. We did rework draft A, ran it through the calendar committee, and brought it back now, and there are 7 days difference. This is primarily a secondary concern. This is not as much an elementary concern. So we gathered some additional information, and I'm going to have Craig share that with you.
But we don't have any formal data that separated elementary teachers or employees versus secondary teachers. So we didn't have any formal data with that, and that's something that we will definitely want to look at. But we did some informal questioning. I questioned schools that I supervise, and some of the comments made of why they felt like they liked option A better was many things of what was shared on this PowerPoint. But some things that they said beyond that was that because of some of the high-stakes testing that takes place at the end, and AP testing and or concurrent testing, along with the fact that we have some end-of-year activities, that 7 days is actually not a whole lot different in what we actually have as far as instructional days. So that's what was presented to us that we wanted to share.
And I will say, I think getting it down to 7 days is a little bit more realistic because end of the year, testing, all of that stuff. It is true that second quarter you do end up with that. It's the 2 weeks that I had a problem with it. That's a significant amount of time. So thank you for taking that back to the calendar.
I'm sorry, you're saying 7 days difference between the semesters?
Correct.
Oh,
Between
yeah, okay.
semester
I want
one
to
and
make sure I was
semester two.
talking about the same thing.
Sure.
So we would.
Nicole?
Please, Karen.
Did I just cut somebody off? I apologize.
Nope, go ahead.
So interestingly enough, it's not very often. I know people might think that a 10% spread is super close. We've had years where it's 51-49. We've had years where it's 50.5 and 49.5. And so to me, looking at these two options, at least how I'm interpreting it, I think a 10% favorability to calendar A speaks volumes for what the survey is trying to accomplish. And while we're not going to please every group or subgroup that took the survey, I just want to say if we're going to put a survey out, then perhaps we should look at the numbers that come from the survey. So I personally right now, I am grateful, Nicole, to your specific concern. I think 7 days is a lot better than 11. I've also heard from teachers and students, similar to what you said, Julie. I've heard some feedback on it's really hard to come back from winter break, have 3, 4, 5 days of school, have those end of semester tasks, and they're still trying to get over kind of that Christmas break, trying to get their feet underneath them and remember the content. And so I do share that concern with you, Julie. It's another reason I favor calendar A.
Could I just make a quick point on that while she indicated a survey, we do prefer the term feedback. We're just obtaining feedback on the calendars right now.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Karen. Are there any other questions or comments?
This is not an action item today, right?
It is an action item.
I move that we accept calendar A.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept calendar A for the 2023-2024 calendar year. Is there any discussion on the action or on the motion, excuse me.
I don't like calendar A for a couple of reasons, but the end of the semester or the end of the school year isn't that much longer for A and B. It might be nice to try and see what it's like to have the semester end. I appreciate Craig telling us what the impact was, as you end the school year compared to the end of the first semester, knowing that there are many days at the end that are not useful. Makes it a bit easier for me to accept the 7 days difference. So, yeah.
Thanks, Connie. Any other thoughts, questions? I do have a question. It was ironic to me that the parents said this matches up, their fall break matches up better with other districts when I believe we're the first one to put out our calendar, if I'm not mistaken. Do we send our calendar to other districts? Do we just like, hey, FYI, if you want to match up, here you go? Or is that not common practice? Just wondering.
So I've never sent the calendar to other districts, but I have jumped on to their sites to look at their calendars.
I mean, I'm well aware because I work in a different district and we have people who work in this district and have, live in a different district. Our breaks do not line up. And
There's a little communication on that just
Is
through
there?
peer groups,
All right.
about
That's
hey,
what I
when that's lining up. But our processes are just slightly different too. So you're right, we are usually the first out of the gate.
Okay. All right, thank you. If there's nothing else, we have a motion and a second. We will go ahead and take a vote on this. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so we have 6 yeas and 1 nay. And the motion passes for draft A. All right, thank you. Thank you, Tina and Craig, for your work, and tell your calendaring committee thank you too. I know that was a lot of work.
Thank you.
All right, Ben and Doug are back in the hot seat. Before we do. Okay, before we turn the time over to Doug and Ben, we are actually going to invite up Robin Edwards, who has signed up to speak to this particular action item. We are going to be talking about the Article 10A2, selection of musical scores and/or theatrical scripts for presentation by secondary schools. So we'd like to invite Robin up. Just as a reminder, Robin, if you will state your name, your full name for the record, as well as your address, and you will have 5 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. My name is Robin Edwards. I teach at Olympus High School. We have been here this is our 3rd time, so I feel like we're all good friends. And thank you for putting us at the end so we could be a part of your lives for the last hour and a half.
Die hard.
Yeah, we're here. We did send you an email, and we are hoping that everyone got a chance to read that. That's really what I would be saying here. So I'm not going to take the 5 minutes, but if you have any questions for me on that email, I would like to address those because I've said everything, we have said everything in that email. So do you have any clarifying questions you'd like to ask us about on that email? Okay. Would any of my colleagues like to say anything at this point?
Susan, will you step over to the microphone and introduce, I'm sorry, she had knee surgery, double knee replacements, like 2 months ago.
Susan DeMille, this is my 26th year working at Olympus High School, a school that I love more than any other school except for perhaps my university, which is Brigham Young. The thing that has been so disturbing to the three of us, and while my colleagues have been here, while I've been recuperating, is the fact that the Community Council has wanted to weigh in on our musical selection. And I'll simply take just a moment to tell you why that is so contrary to productivity. The three of us together for 26 years spend an inordinate amount of time with each and every one of our students. I know their first name and their last name. I know their parents. I know their likes. I know their dislikes. I know whose brother is doing something to them that's bothering them. We know our kids. We spend a great deal of time with them. And in that sort of position where we are integrally associated one with another, we also determine the selections of our high school musicals that we take seriously because of the life lessons that those students get in the process of learning, singing, dancing, telling a story. There's a great deal of education that comes from that curriculum of musical theater. Those selections that the three of us stew and think and study and research, we do that with our students' likes and dislikes, positives and negatives in mind. Why would a school board that doesn't spend the time with those kids that don't know them, do not know what their talents are or the things that we need to bring out in a student, why would it make sense for those people to have discretion when it comes to selecting a musical? I'm here to tell you that it would not be appropriate if they spent the kind of time that we do with the students. And I'm not talking now just with the students, but on behalf of the students. I can't tell you how many scripts I read each year when coming up with what we want to present to our students to perform. Read and reread and look over. I myself have probably seen every show on Broadway just because this is my niche. This is what I'm passionate about. So, unless I have any other thing for my colleagues, I just want to say that we would like to eliminate having any participation from the Community Council and allow the same process that has happened for the last 26 years that I've been there, 30 for these two, to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Robin. All right, we will go ahead and turn.
Yeah, board members, thank you for having me again. Under the direction of board leadership, we have made the modifications to the policy from the last reading, word for word from last board meeting's motion. And we've tried to stay true to what the motion intended, and that is the policy that you have in front of you. Based on some discussion, some additional discussion that the board members were having, I also did, just for reference, provide to you a copy of the original policy, what the policy is currently, that's on our website, and you are, anybody can go and see that policy. Article 10A2, that's the text that's in the current policy, just for your reference. As you're taking a look at the modifications that have been made over the last 3 months. I don't have anything further to discuss at this point, but I would be happy to facilitate any conversation or any additional suggestions that the board has I think my esteemed colleague does have something that he'd like to say.
I would just add to what Doug just pointed out with respect to the current policy. I would also point out that the current revision that was proposed originally when we started this conversation several months ago was to simply codify the practice that was already in place. And I would indicate that this was not targeted towards any specific school or location. We just knew that this was something ongoing and where that we wanted to make sure that our practice was codified. And that's what's the intent of the policy itself, the proposal.
And I would just add codified so that it's consistent, district-wide.
You're telling me this is a statement of purpose that the policy originally has been?
Yes, that's what it is currently in our policy. What
every
you have, what was submitted to you was the modifications and the iterations of those modifications over the last 3 months.
So our school administrators have been visiting with our district administration and just getting approval. Has that been the process?
That's been the policy in the past, yeah.
Well, you're saying that this has been the policy, right?
Mm-hmm. That's been the policy for many years.
In some schools, the procedure has been to ask the community council.
That's right. So, and again, I don't mean to open up a can of worms, but
Right.
but we have trained on this issue that the best practice is for principals to run or to always to present their selections to their community councils and ask for feedback.
I know that hasn't happened at Olympus, but it has happened at other schools because I've been there when it happened. So I know it has happened. Like Skyline, I've been there and seen it happen. And several other ones too. But it hasn't been a full policy for everyone. This has been the policy.
Correct, the
That's
formal
correct.
policy.
That's the policy.
And I would also delineate that practice, again, was never that a formal vote be taking place. It was simply a feedback component from the school community council.
There's never been a requirement of any kind that community councils approve of any of the musical selections.
Now, this is for my benefit. I know all the rest of you understand all this, but will you explain the legal terms of shall?
Sure.
Will and may.
Yeah.
And should, add should in there. Should as well.
Oh, should.
Should, shall, will, and may.
It's actually an excellent question, and it's one that the superintendent and I have talked about with other board members. Typically in policies, and over the years, we have tried to eliminate discretionary language in policies because discretionary language is typically associated with procedures, typically associated with areas where we allow discretion for administrators. Where in policies, if there's something that we deem to be a requirement, then we would always use shall in policy making. And it's always best practice to do that. That doesn't mean that it happens in every case, but it is definitely best practice that if you're creating policies, that policies, especially at the board level, would be requirements that the board is placing on the actions of the district in order to enact your best judgments and to make sure that the will of the board is being fulfilled. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't write discretionary language into policies, but that discretionary language does introduce some level of ambiguity and makes it somewhat difficult for administrators to follow those policies, for example. And so we tend to avoid that if possible. And so if there is language regarding may or should, those are typically issues that we leave for training and procedures.
So it's not something you have to do?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. What about will?
Will, in my opinion, is just poor drafting. Will is.
I don't like that word.
So will would be like shall. So
Will is
instead of
definitely
will,
an
you would say
imperative. It is a shall, but shall is much clearer than will.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have been so back and forth on this policy, to be quite honest. And where I've landed is that really the only concern would be if you had somebody who made a mistake, a professional who made a mistake and didn't think through all of the unintended consequences of something. And in that case, if we have a principal or a superintendent who is looking at that decision, then we've created a safety net for that. And I don't feel that it's necessary to have the community buy into it. I think it's a really nice thing. And I actually think it would be helpful probably to a staff to go to a community council and get them all excited about the show that they're gonna put on, because it isn't just about the kids who are in the show, it's about all the people in the community who are coming to the show also, right? So I think it's good practice to go to the community. But I think in terms of what is necessary and what is needed, and I don't want to over policy here. I'd prefer to just leave this that our fail-safe is that we have an administrator who has looked at this also. And if the superintendency proposes that we also need a member of the superintendency to look at it, then I'm okay with that too. But that's where I'm at. And so I would recommend actually eliminating number 2, B2. And also there's been some concern about the word collaborate in number 1. And I would suggest that we change that to something about teachers should present their final selection to the school level administrator.
Instead of should, could you put shall in there?
Yes, shall will be fine there.
Chris, do you want to speak?
Yeah.
You sent out an email.
So
earlier.
I feel like a lot of policy is to have a framework, so we are supporting our staff and teachers. And I feel like this one, kind of some of these changes go a little bit too far in that. But I do like Julie's, comment that the selection of musical and theater productions shall primarily be a local decision made at the school level. And then I also do not like where it said teachers and administrators shall collaborate. I think it needs to say teachers shall make their selections and then present to administration for approval. So something like that. And then the number 3 is similar to what we just got handed out is so similar. So I think really maybe the discussion is just on number 2, so.
Do you want to see the policy up on the screen?
With the changes to number 1. Thank you, Clark.
Okay, so teachers shall make selections and present them to school administrators for approval. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So teacher, say that one more time.
Teachers shall make selections and present them
To administration
to
for
school,
approval.
yeah, to school administration for approval.
Right, correct.
Do we need it to be plural? I don't want to take any power away from the drama teacher to say, this is our musical selection. Because sometimes if you do selections, plural, then we kind of get back into, oh my goodness, am I having to come up with several selections? And then the principal has to decide, no. We want to empower the drama teacher, so does it need to be plural?
I think it does, because we're talking about multiple types of selections. We've got musical scores, theatrical scripts, et cetera.
So like throughout the year, you're
If the
saying
drama
not just
teacher
one?
goes and says, this is
As long as it doesn't read this
everything.
where it sounds like it's more than one, because I don't want to take that, I want, like I said, I want to empower the drama teacher to be able to make their particular selection for that kind of year and then present it. So that's fine if it's plural, as long as it's not being read in that way.
Right.
But I don't think anybody means any offense in any way, but we have 3 different teachers represented tonight, and it's more of a directorial team than one teacher. So I think the language is fine to say teachers, but when we refer to the drama teacher, it's really the entire team of professionals that's involved in that selection process. It's more than just a drama teacher.
So as long as it's plural teachers.
Yeah, I support that.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
First of all, I've enjoyed getting to know you ladies better, okay? We appreciate your passion and your love for what you do and what you do for the good of the students. They even called me on the cruise, you know, but they were kind enough to hang up and wait till I got back. But thank you. First of all, what kind of feedback have we gotten from other schools?
The feedback from other schools has been fairly consistent in that they want to retain discretion at the school level, but they're amenable to getting buy-in from their administrators, from school community councils, and from district officials if necessary.
Appreciate that. Now, can you ladies guarantee me you'll continue teaching for another 50 years?
It's things like this that make retirement very, very.
I understand that. And we live in, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
I'm sure I'm out of time. This has been a difficult process because we felt like we had been kind of put on trial here. And it did start at Olympus. We know that this whole event came from Olympus's selection, which we were never allowed to speak to. And had we been given an opportunity to speak to, I think you would have maybe seen 2 sides of the same story.
Okay. But you can't guarantee me you're not going to continue teaching.
I just had my knees replaced. I've been here for another 10 years.
Very good, 10, but you didn't say 50. So. But, and the point of that is, we live in some interesting times. I think we'd all agree with that. And there are a lot of people who maybe disagree with how you view things. And we respect that. But we need some safeguards too, because I believe, because of the difficult times that we live in. Oh, Karen, if you can't hear me, I'm talking to these people out here, but I'll speak up here. So, based on Doug's explanation of these words, how do I get rid of that? Shoot. Oh, thank you, sorry. Number 1, selection of musical and theatrical productions shall be a local decision. I don't think we as a board are taking that decision away from you, as I read it, respectfully feel. Made at the school level, teachers and administrators shall collaborate in making selections. There's some real safety in collaboration.
Well, we're talking about changing the word collaborate to represent.
I know, I'm just reading it as we've got it right here. So, oftentimes when we talk, we begin to see unintended consequences, or we see the benefits of. So I don't see us as a school board taking that away from you. We want you to have that. You know your students much better than we do. You love your students. I feel that, and I respect that. So number 1, I don't think we're taking that away from you. Number 2, teachers and administrators should. That's a training thing. That's not a you have to. Present their selection to the school community council and seek feedback. Again, the difficult times in which we live, I think we as a school board have a responsibility to try to help and protect you. Not maybe you, but a future teacher coming in. I don't know. I don't know what views they're going to have. But we're not requiring that. We're saying you should, based on what I'm reading. And I think that's, people in the community live, and they're the parents of the students that you work with. Now, we're not asking, in your letter you said if there's a play that has swear words, I realize there are plays that may have that or have other things in the play that maybe I don't agree with, but are okay. But I think it helps you to listen to that feedback. We're not giving the community council power to stop a musical from going forward. We're just saying, here's a safeguard, protect yourselves. And let me finish, then I'll entertain. Is that all right? Okay. Number 3, thereafter, principals may, again, that's a training, it's not something we're requiring, present the selection to a designated member of the superintendency for final review and approval. It's not a requirement, but the more eyes we have into it, I realize sometimes it can muddy it up, but we may be able to stop some unintended consequences. So I respect, I understand. I don't see personally we're taking anything away from you. I don't believe we're saying we know your students better. But because of the climate in which we live, and we are going to continue living in, I think we maybe need to have some safeguards. Now, this young lady wanted to speak. And will you take the mask down so I can understand you?
Vicki Belknap, Olympus High School. Thank you. I think the safeguard lands by any disapproval by the principal, just like a classroom curriculum, which is what we have. The teacher could be called in, the directorial team, and we can say, this isn't, let's discuss this is not working. We don't need to have a preemptive interference. The safeguard is after the selection has respectfully been made, the curriculum is given to the teacher. The curriculum choice is made by the teacher. So I understand what you're saying about safeguards, and I see that perspective. And the safeguard comes if a wrong choice is made. And if the principal is privy to knowing what that choice is before it's announced to the students or the performers or the potential actors. If you have discussions and collaboration, Mr. Bodden, it will be an exhaustive undertaking. Just the conversations, the emails, the agendas of parents wanting their children to be leads. I can tell you, it would be very hard on us. And I think the safeguards exist just by having the principal have the power that the principal needs to have.
So, sorry, before you continue, so Julie already made the suggestion that we drop number 2. Chris made earlier the suggestion in the email per the conversation that we had that actually we flipped 2 and 3. And I know I've heard people make the comment of instead with the community council 1, teachers and administrators may present their selection to the school community councils and seek feedback, and may seek feedback. If we put that at the end, that way it can happen. I mean, that timeline can be, that's not a defined timeline. That timeline can happen 2 days before you announce it to the school. It can happen.
That'd be great.
I agree.
So
I don't think we're inhibiting them at all.
So Julie made that suggestion, and Chris made the other suggestion. Can we speak to that, Julie?
Can I give another suggestion to speak to, too? I feel like just in terms of making policy, I feel weird that we're like giving permission but not creating obligation. Because do we need to give permission to take it to the community council if you want, or permission that if you want to talk to your superintendency member about it, you can? I just feel weird about both 2 and 3 because I don't think we need to give people permission to do things like that. I think that if they want to do it, they can. And so I don't know why we would put that in there. Maybe we should, I mean, it's almost like we should put another thing in there that says, and therefore, principals may also not present the selection to a designated member. You see what I'm saying?
So, okay, sorry, superintendent and I did have something to say before, so did you?
No, this is right on line. I'm just curious, Doug, given the feedback you've heard right now, what do you have in terms of how that policy would read in respect to the shoulds, the shall, the discretionary language, the elimination of parts of, or 2 and parts of 3? Do you have?
We don't have feedback on, we hadn't sought feedback on.
No, just from what we've heard here in terms of what Nicole's just summarized.
Oh, I see what you mean.
From this discussion, correct?
From this discussion, how would it, given where are we at in terms of how it would read?
So it wouldn't change it at all. I mean, are you talking about reversing 2 and 3, reversing numbers 2 and 3?
No, number 1, too, also changing that teachers and administration shall collaborate. I think it needs to say teachers shall make their selection.
Yeah, that's what we have so far. Is that what you're saying? So selection of musical and theatrical productions shall primarily be a local decision made at the school level. Teachers shall make selections and present them to school administrators for approval.
Yeah.
That's how 1 would read.
Right.
And I'm suggesting we end it right there.
That's what I'm saying. So the discussion.
It scares me to be on their good side.
What do you mean? Just have number 1, that's it?
Yeah.
So Julie has.
Because the rest of it is just like, and if you want to do this, you could, and if you want to do that, you could, and it just feels like it's not tight policy.
One way and the principal feels a different way.
Well, can I?
The principal gets to say, right there.
So
Yeah,
Julie,
can I speak to that?
Yeah, Chris and Clark had comments.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think we need a policy to say that teachers and administrators may present to the community council. They have that opportunity regardless of the circumstances. That can always happen. And that gives each school the opportunity to take into consideration their school community and what they need to do to best align themselves with that community. And I'm with Julie on this issue in that I think we need to emphasize that we want our teachers to have local control. We want to let them be the teachers. We want to let our principals govern those principals. And we don't need to over-legislate by saying you can do this if you want. It's just not necessary. They can do that regardless at any point in time.
Well, and Terry, I think there's a difference between like policy and procedure. Like this is policy. This is the policy we're trying to make. And Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, procedure is kind of what the framework that like the principal would get or the teachers would get of how to proceed with what they would do. Where this is just the policy saying this is what we feel like needs to be done, but then it goes to procedure of how it actually goes through the inner workings.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if this is good or not, but I'm going to anyway. I can tell by the way you ladies are responding, you don't want the community council input. No, is that true?
Correct.
Okay. So you take a play to the musical to the principal, and the principal says, I don't know. You're passionate, I understand that, you put your time in that in. I think I want to talk to the community about this. What's going to be your response?
Well, with this, it sounds like we could if we wanted to because it's
But what would your response probably be? Could it be, I don't know, they don't need to know that. They don't know our students like we know our students.
And we will have researched that to the extent that we know if we wouldn't do it if there were questionable material.
But you're not going to teach for the next 50 years.
But I still think given that the teacher is, their job, if they're real educators, they're studying and learning and making sure that this program is appropriate for kids and parents.
And I respect everything that you've said and what you feel. Thank you. Okay.
And I should be clear. I think seeking parent feedback can be valuable, but there needs to be a balance, and I think we need to trust our teachers and our principals at the local level in that regard.
But if a teacher, a group are very emphatic that, hey, we don't want parental involvement, I know the principal, they work with you and they want to please you. I understand that. So sometimes maybe they might shy away from going to the community based on the feedback they got from teachers. Maybe, maybe not, but it's a real possibility. Human nature, I don't know.
May I add something to that as well, having been a former principal? You have that challenge, Terry, but the other challenge you have is not all administrators feel well-versed in performing arts materials. And to get input from their community, including parents, whether it be the PTA or the community council, can be helpful.
But I think, John, that if I were a principal and I was unsure, I'd go do some research. I'd talk to some people. I'd talk to you, who was my supervisor. I'd be doing some things to make sure that I felt safe. And if I felt like my community wasn't going to be sure, I'd go ask them. Even if these guys got mad that I went and asked them, I'd go ask them because it's going to fall on my shoulders, and I know that because I'm a principal.
And that's exactly why we had that in there previously as practice, was to seek feedback from community members.
So the question is, does that need to be in policy?
I know I can do it if I want, though.
Does it need to be in policy, though, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I'm saying I don't think it needs to be in policy because I think a principal already has the right to do that if they want. I just don't want to get in. I think that as a practice, it's not a good practice to put things that you may or may not do if you'd like in policy. I don't think that's policy. So my issue, I actually think that these guys should definitely take every single one of theirs they should do their reveals for the community council as well when they reveal it, because they could get all those people on board. It would be a great thing if they had time to do it. But I don't think it's policy. That's my issue. I don't think it's policy. Unless we decide to say, no, you have to go to the community council, then it's policy.
So really quick, Karen and Connie haven't had a chance to comment. Do you guys have any comments that you'd like to add?
Well, I think community council could and should know the selection, and then they may seek feedback, whether or not they do or not. But I feel the need that the community should know what they're doing before it's announced, or the council should know before it's announced. And after the principal and everyone's approved it, what does it hurt that they should let the community council know?
Can I speak to that? Because it's a huge amount of work for the teachers. That's what, it's like this other huge step. You think it's just going to the community council and presenting it, but it isn't. It's like all these emails about it now that you have to address, and it can become this huge deal. Oh, I thought you meant to require them to go seek feedback. Okay.
Number 2 isn't required.
No, number 2 isn't required, and that's why I'm saying, why would we make policy of things we aren't going to require people to do? That's
But
why
it would be good practice. Is that why we would add it in there,
It'd be good
Doug?
practice.
So it would be recommended as good practice. So I think that's why it has been included in there, and we would encourage that as good practice.
That's why it was included originally.
And I would point out too, with respect to the comments that have been made, this has been an ongoing practice for over a decade. And I'm not familiar with any
not in all, but in
circumstance
many schools.
wherein we've had difficulties with that. I would also point out, I think the primary concern from an administrative perspective on this is to ensure administrative approval, which has not always happened in certain circumstances. I would also point out, I've had a couple of administrators who are listening online and made some suggestions here. So with your permission, Board Vice President, I'd like to share a couple of those comments. One administrator indicated that parents who do sit on the community council do know their kids, and they're familiar with them, and they should have some feedback as part of that process. And I had another administrator indicate that the administrative approval process needs to be clarified in the process. And the 30 days in the current policy is actually very good because it allows plenty of time for that to be vetted appropriately before production begins. So just passing along those comments from a few administrators who have reached out via text who are watching online.
Thank you. Can I see if Karen has anything to add to that? Karen?
So my philosophy, my thoughts on this is, thanks everybody for your comments. I know there's a variety of opinions on this. I can't see the audience, but I've been able to hear. I kind of have to say I'm really surprised that that there are those who want to take the community completely out, especially when musicals draw the community in. They really are community events. And so my observation is that kind of a little bit that blows my mind, if I'm being honest, to just kind of wipe the community out. I don't think that it should be required to obviously not gain approval. I fought for that since the beginning of that, to remove that approval piece and to have that be consistent from the get-go, and try to get more empowerment to the teacher or the teacher team, as Clark pointed out, to get their selection, to narrowed and obviously choose their one thing to take to the principal. So I support that. We live in a time where right now we have a legislature that's trying to find more ways for parents to have input in their kids' public education. So for us as a board to basically say, well, no, we're going to take the community council completely out of this policy, to me raises my eyebrows a little bit. I don't understand why we would be supporting the removal of just bringing people in, not for approval, not for any kind of consent, because the decision has already been made before it's even brought forward to the community council. I guess I just don't understand the harm in just saying this is what our musical is. So those are just my thoughts. I know that might not be a popular opinion to some of the audience, but that's just where my mind is currently.
Thanks, Karen.
Can I clarify that? I don't think, at least from my part, I want to make sure I am in suggesting that we eliminate numbers 2 and 3. I am not saying that we should eliminate the community in any of this. I'm simply saying that this is not the appropriate place to be giving permission for things people already had permission to do, and that they could do if they want or couldn't do if they don't want. Because, you could continue this list through number 4 and 5. Number 4 could be teachers could consider the talents of the unique individuals as they were determining which play to do. Or number 6 could be teachers could look at the political climate and make decisions accordingly. It's like, how far do you go with the permissions of what people may or may not do? So for me, I think that the community is still, can still be a piece of this. My issue is about this trend of over-policizing. And I made up that word, I think.
It's a good word.
Put that in somewhere.
Okay.
So I would like to add my 2 cents. I do appreciate and approve of what was changed in number 1 and B1. I think it should be shall make the selections and present them to the school administration for approval. I think that is important, and that's where really this policy is critical. The buck stops with the school administrator, and they need to be able to have that final approval, because when stuff hits the fan, that's the desk that it lands on. And so for them to, they have to deal with the blowback, so they need to be the ones that make the approval. I suggested changing 3 and 2 just because of the timeline. And I don't mind, thereafter principals may present the selection to a designated member of the superintendency. The may in there, I know is a little bit more, what did you call it?
Discretionary.
Discretionary, thank you. It's more discretionary, but
The purpose obviously that, for that is so that a principal can receive some additional support.
Some guidance and support, and
Right.
if they need to have
Right.
John be the one that lands, that it lands on his desk, that's where it goes to, so they have a backup as well. So that's why I feel like it is important to be able to leave that in there so that they have that in policy as far as if you have a question, this is where you go next, and this is what you do.
But that's in their job description. They already know that. That's my argument.
Well, they could go to their director, they could go, it's not necessarily, please go to John for this approval, or whoever's in that position.
Well, that brings up a good issue, because why not go to their director if they have a question?
Do you want to address that, John?
Uniformly.
Actually, when it said assistant superintendent there, it generally was reviewed by the person that was over curriculum, which at the time was Linda, and now it's Rick. So
So it
it
would go
wouldn't
to
really
Rick and not
necessarily
you.
go to me, it would probably go to Rick.
Okay.
And that was in the original policy, I'll just say. The original policy read that it would be approved by a member of the superintendency.
So taking that out, first of all, to me, removes that safety net for the principal, and second of all, removes, that was the original policy in the first place.
But I want to make sure and say, it's still there. The safety net is not taken away. It's still there, it's just not written here. This is like a reminder.
But then again, if there's.
Like if this were an asterisk, I might feel better.
Right, and I guess, talking to these ladies, it's true, I feel like these ladies are somebody that, I don't think they would put anything up on stage that would be questionable, but is that always going to be the case, as Terry pointed out? We need to have a policy in place that everybody has the same, it's good practice. In education, it's good practice. It's not necessarily, you have to do this, but this is good practice. Maybe they don't have a functioning community council, so the shall or the may in the presenting it to a community council becomes, okay, well, we don't have a community council, so how can we present it if we do a shall? But a may, it's just good practice to do this.
But this is not a place of practice. This is a place of policy. I don't, see, I'm not arguing anything you're saying. I agree with all of it. I just don't think this is the place for it. That's my problem.
Do you want to, Doug, do you have anything to add as far as the good
Doug,
practice?
I want your response on this. Tell us between policy and procedure, what is more appropriate, yeah.
At the risk of swaying anybody in this decision, because really, when it comes down to it, the board can create policies that it wants for its school district. That's your prerogative. You have plenary authority to do just that. It is best, if you're talking about the drafting of policy drafting typically is reserved for those things that are, that a board does want to ensure is occurring in the district, as far as district practices. That doesn't mean that the board has to tell administrators every single thing that they need to do. Otherwise, we would be over-policizing and micromanaging the work of staff. However, these things can be trained on. They could be added to an administrative memo, for example, if the board didn't feel comfortable putting it in a policy that was enshrined as one of your actual policies for the district. So my opinion about what should be in policy is that less is more, essentially. That policy should be reserved for those things that the board feels very strongly that need to be a part of the district's practices, which is why we try to reserve language for shall. Now, if I go through my policies, that's not always the case. And there are lots of examples where we have policies where the board has put in best practices. And I would say that is consistent with every single district. Now, as the policy drafter, I'm always wanting to pare back policies, and I'm always wanting to make them as simplified as possible. And so to me, simplification means you're ceding control to your teachers, administrators, and relying on John and me and others to train them appropriately. If it's something that's important to you, put it in policy. If it's something you believe that might change over time, or that you feel like we can train on, or that it's just a procedure that doesn't necessarily need to be consistent every single time you go through that process, then leave it for us to train on it. So if you, in a case like this, there is a desire, and the reason that we brought the policy to begin with was so that there would be consistency in the practice, right? That doesn't mean that you have to put it in policy for there to be consistency, but it does ensure consistency if it's in the policy, if that makes sense. Kind of an answer, non-answer.
So if I'm understanding then, it seems like we need to decide if it is important enough for us to be consistent with, it sounds like everybody's
The same process
okay.
every time, every school, always, for now and forever.
Which has been clearly pointed out by our friends from Olympus, didn't happen, right? There was a consistency problem.
So is it important enough? I don't know if anybody has strong opinions. It seems like Karen said she felt like it was important enough that we should be presenting it to the community council. That's important enough to her to keep it in policy, if I'm not mistaken. Karen, did you?
That's fine. I mean, I'm open to other perspectives, but yeah, I mean, right now that's, yeah.
So do we
I
have
still
a
have to
motion?
keep them involved.
We don't have a motion.
There's been several things.
Did you have something, Dr. Knight? Does anybody want to speak to that? Are you,
Yes.
Clark, do you feel like this is enough of a, do you feel strongly enough that you feel like this needs to be in policy, or?
I'll make a motion.
Well, I guess I'll respond to the question with that. Yeah, I do feel I'm in a little bit of a dichotomy here, in that I believe in the parental involvement and parental feedback, and I'm strongly believe in the function of the community council to provide that. On the other hand, I'm uncomfortable with over legislating or over policizing when we're going to use words like may anyway. So it just seems like unnecessary policy if there's just that discretion. So if our intent is to encourage it, then maybe it belongs, and it belongs with the word may. If we don't need to encourage it, then I don't think it belongs.
I'd like to make a motion. Based on consistency, I move that we accept the policy article 10A2, selection of musical scores and/or theatrical scripts for presentation in secondary schools, as written in our agenda.
Okay, so Terry has made a motion to accept Article 10A2, selection of musical scores and/or theatrical scripts for presentation in secondary schools, as it is stated in our agenda.
Is it stated in the agenda, or with Chris's modification, her amendment?
As stated in the agenda.
Okay.
Do we have a second for that? Okay, motion fails.
Got us going.
I would like to share a motion, and it's a little bit hard for me to follow everything here. When we want, that first part that talks about collaborate with the principal and teacher, did we determine that we want that to say the teacher team or teachers present their selection to the principal? I would support a motion that makes that clarification, because I think you can easily replace collaborate with just teachers presenting their selection as part of that. And I don't think we need to require feedback from the community council. I do think that I do think they should be all of a sudden these teachers have to open a huge can of worms and go, give the community council time to go and ask, it could just be, hey, this is the play we're doing, or here, this is the musical we're doing. So that's kind of where I'm standing on. I do like that teachers get to choose and then present their selection to the principal for approval. And I also don't think that feedback should be required. That's where I am.
So Connie had a comment first, and Chris, did you have something?
I agree with that. If in the second we get rid of and seek feedback, so that we just should present that to the community council. I think it's important that the community council knows what the play is and that they are involved in knowing.
And just to be clear, there's not a timeline on that. It could be the day before you announce it to the school. It could be at any point. Chris, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
I'm going to move that we accept policy or Article 10A2 as stated in our packet with the following amendments. Chris's proposed change to sentence number 2 in section B1, and with the following change to section B2 that states teachers and administrators should present their selection to the school community council, period. And then 3, as it's presented already in the proposed information in our board packet.
Okay, so there has been a motion for Article 10A2, selection of musical scores and/or theatrical scripts for presentation in secondary schools, to be accepted with the following changes. In B1, second sentence, it will read, teachers shall make selections and present them to the school administration for approval. And in B2, teachers and administrators should present their selections to the school community council.
And I just want to clarify, I think selection should be singular, not plural, in paragraph B1.
In both of them, or in one?
In both.
In both?
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at earlier, Carter. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll second. Oh,
Okay, so
sorry, Terry.
Terry seconded, I think, first. Sorry, Chris.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Just in order to try to get it just right, on B2, could we put teachers and/or administrators so that the teachers don't feel like they have to be the ones there, that the principal can do it if they want? And then also, I just want to be sensitive to that principal who texted in to Ben, who said, can we get some sort of a, something direction to the principals of what that means, like 30 days before they do it, or I don't know if we want to put something like that. We've got that in there for the superintendency, 30 days before any work begins on the production, but we don't have anything for the administrators. And I guess maybe there's a separate process that would be put into place that would not be appropriate here, but I just wanted to
Is that implied,
talk
though,
about
if
that.
you have to
I
have?
would actually just recommend for simplicity, just to combine those 3 paragraphs into one paragraph and have that last portion that says at least 30 days before any work to apply to the whole paragraph.
Okay, so we've already had a motion and a second. Would we like to?
Can I amend my motion?
Can we have to amend?
Okay.
All right. I'm going to amend my motion as follows. I move that we accept Article 10A2 as follows. Section B1 will read, selection of musical and theatrical productions shall primarily be a local decision made at the school level. Teachers shall present their selection to school administrators, or to
School administrator.
to the
Teachers shall
school
make a
administration.
selection and present it, is how we have it written, but I can change it.
Thank you, that's fine. And present it to the school administrator.
For approval.
For approval. And then at that point, combine the remainder of paragraph 3 as currently constituted in the board packet. Paragraph 2 shall then read, teachers and administrators teachers and/or administrators should present their selection, singular, to the school community council, period.
Clark, you know the difference is that on the number 3, it says B on our current one, and on the other one, it says shall. Wait, it says it shall be the responsibility. So do you want may or shall for the principals to give it to the superintendent?
My copy that I'm looking at says principals may.
On this one?
Oh, excuse me.
I thought this was
No.
the original
No,
that you wanted.
No, so this is
Yeah,
the old
that's not the one
policy.
we're
I'm talking
working
about
from, though.
paragraph
Oh.
B3.
You wanted the original on this?
B3,
I'm in.
yes.
Okay.
B3 is
So-
currently
Would you
constituted.
state
Are
that
you-
again? So-
So hang on for just a second. So what
Do you want me to
Doug was
read it to
saying
you
was
the way
he-
I understand it,
Yeah.
or would that be helpful?
Doug was saying he recommended combining them all into one paragraph instead of having a 1, 2, 3, correct? Is that what you
I
had
thought it was just
recommended?
1 and 3 were going to be combined.
We could do it, either of those two ways, I think would simplify it a great deal.
Could you read it to
Could
us?
Doug read?
If you want to keep it into 2 paragraphs, it would read just like this. Okay.
I can see
Oh, you're on the wrong screen now.
Sorry, Karen, you're not going to be able to see this.
We were so
We
close.
hooked up Doug's computer to show the draft.
Well, if you stop debating this, I told you how to get out of here early. If you just agree with me, you get out of here early, Terry.
You're supposed to kick him under the table.
I've been, this whole time.
You sure been kicking him and not the wall?
I don't know, my foot hurts.
You gotta be kidding me. There it is.
It's so difficult on these days. Did you get joy out of this?
What'd you do?
I have 2 screens in my office, and so I have to. Okay. I'm actually going to have to read it off of there because I can't see it on my own screen. Selection. Number B1 would say, selection of musical and theatrical productions shall primarily be a local decision made at the school level. Teachers shall make a selection and present it to school administration for approval. Thereafter, principals may present the selection to a designated member of the superintendency for final review. Should I say final review, leave it at that? Or approval? Do you want approval?
Is that a yes, you want approval, Clark? Are you?
Let's leave it as is.
Okay, and approval at least 30 days before any work begins on the production. Number 2, teachers and/or administrators should present their selections to school community council.
All right, so I'm going to repeat my motion. My motion is that we accept policy 10A2 as just read by Mr. Larson, with the 2 paragraphs separated as they are, subparagraphs B1 and B2.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve Article 10A2, selection of musical scores and/or theatrical scripts for presentation in secondary schools as recorded by Mr. Doug Larson and was read into record, and we have a second on that. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
I want to say that I'm going to vote for this because philosophically, I'm aligned, but pedagogically, I'm just not. I want to make sure that's clear.
All right, any other further comments, questions, concerns? All right, we will call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously.
I'll never tell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to
think-
say we got a lot of feedback on that policy, and I really appreciate that lots of people took interest and helped with that. Yeah, you three here, but also a lot of other people did too, and I appreciate it.
And we appreciate that it does, I hope that gives some assurance that this is yours, that this is your show and your thing, and that gives you the discretion as to what you need to do with that. All right, we're going to go on to reports. Go on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Vice President. Just a couple things I wanted to highlight for the board and for the public. One is we had a transition to distance learning for 4 days, and that's a decision that is never, ever taken lightly. The board held a special meeting. Those issues were presented. The hope was in making that move that our students and staff would get well, many of them being afflicted given the recent surge of Omicron. And as we looked at the 2 weeks prior to those 9 days, prior to that transition to distance learning, we had what was 2,126 substitute requests in those 9 days. That's about, on average, 236 substitute requests a day. Our substitute pool was also affected, clearly, by our current conditions, and our fill rate was only at 52%, right? So for those 9 days leading up, we were really struggling to staff classes. It was also very apparent that about a third of all of our support staff in various positions were also afflicted. Last week, first week that we had been back, we averaged 143 substitute requests a day. Now that's a decrease of about 100 a day. So those that were afflicted, they had that time. We were able to provide some educational services for students in distance learning. People were able to get healthy, and our substitute fill rate was 80%, meaning even our substitute pool was also in a position they were getting healthy and they were able to take those positions. So we appreciate that effort to get back to a place where staffing isn't such an impediment in our ability to provide educational services for students. And there's things that we've learned along the way continually about what a transition to distance learning looks like. It is an element of last resort. And so as we continue navigating this, working under the guardrails, one of the state legislature, but two, also the health department and their current recommendations, we continue to navigate these conditions. A few changes that have been made also, the incubation period for when someone's been exposed or they've had the virus, as you recall, used to be 14 days. So our rolling calendar on our COVID-19 dashboard housed by the Salt Lake County Health Department showed the case numbers over 14 days attributed to the school and the students that attended therein. That incubation period has been shortened to 7 days. And so given this Omicron, again, it's just some adjustments that our state epidemiologists are making, the Utah Department of Health, the Salt Lake County Health Department, to take it from 14 to 7 days. We continue to monitor those conditions and are communicating out with the families what those conditions are as they are occurring in our school. So we're still very and ever present. We're grateful that staff are able to have gotten well. We'll monitor staffing conditions throughout. I'd also just make mention House Bill 184 that provides for the use of legislative days is moving forward. It just passed out of the House. Some 74 votes to 0, yay votes to 0, nay votes with one absent. But sorry, House Bill 184 really speaks to 53F Chapter 2, Section 102. That says there's 4 boards, local boards, can have up to 4 days or 32 hours of instruction time that would normally be reserved for instruction time for teacher planning or teacher professional learning days. Typically in our calendar, we've used one of those days in the past. What this bill does is allow LEAs, districts, to have greater flexibility in when to put those in the calendar. Now, we had a calendar discussion this evening. This is really identifying, though, what is in the current law requires 90 days before the start of school for the use of those days. This year and next year, the legislature is saying there may need, the sponsor is Jefferson Moss, the Senate sponsor is Senator Milner. They're saying, let's give LEAs, districts, some flexibility and only require a 2-week notice at some point during the year. Of course, if we are to use those days, we would very much give as much notice as possible to our families, because it is a tremendous impact when you're thinking about families that work and arranging their work schedules and. So we are working with our legislature on that bill to provide a little extra flexibility. Our teacher planning day that we did have last Friday, the district was able to send out to homes and families some materials for families to engage with their students. There was a lot of work that was put together previous this last summer that is content grade specific for these academic resources for use in the home by teachers with students, et cetera. So that all went out, and the feedback we've received is how appreciative our educators are, regardless of job classification, for the use of that time to be able to plan, grade, work on interventions, small group instruction, small group lesson planning, really to address the conditions wrought upon us by COVID-19 and the pandemic generally. I'd also say it is the legislative session, and there's a lot of bills that we get really excited about, and there's some that we have some concerns about. We have joint legislative committee, and Terry, you may speak to this in your report, but we take positions on those bills. We share what those positions are. As a Utah School Boards Association, as a Superintendent's Association, then we work with the bill sponsors either to support those bills, to amend those bills, or to even work against, where necessary, some bills. And so that's been ongoing. A couple that we're really excited about, one is a student intervention early warning program. It'll be heard in Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee tomorrow morning. We'll have an opportunity to speak to that. Full day kindergarten would be a tremendous benefit to the families in our school district as the state looks to scale the funding so that any family, any child that would be desirous to have full day kindergarten services wouldn't be denied. That's currently not the case. We have students, we have families who are denied full day kindergarten opportunities for the lack of full day kindergarten that's available. So the legislature is working on that. We're working with them on that. And then last bill, just for tonight, is the Early Literacy Outcomes Improvement Bill. This really is a recognition by the state that takes multiple agencies from public education to engaging families and community services to higher education, the state legislature and the State Board of Education, to prioritize early literacy. Literacy in that space, particularly in K-3, literacy is the gateway for access to and success in all the other content areas. And I would argue success in life, generally. Without that is severely compromised. This bill really is a prioritization of the state to say literacy matters to us. We're not complacent with how our students are performing at the moment. What resources, what collective effort and alignment of that effort is needed to change those outcomes in our state. So we're really excited about that. And lastly, Terry's asking me to wrap up. I appreciate that. No, you're not, Terry. But I am droning on a little bit. I can see it in your eyes. It's okay. Lastly, still doing our work around our strategic planning, and we'll have an opportunity to present that to the board, is to say, hey, what are these priorities in terms of getting down to the core fundamentals, providing high quality educational services in our district, and to do so systematically rather than programmatically. How are we aligning that effort, those budgets, the programs we may pursue, and what that looks like moving into the future. And really the strategic plan is also, and should be, evident, a clear acknowledgement that we have and our students have experienced significant impacts to their learning progression given our current condition, and how do we see ourselves working through those and being successful despite some of those, and how we come out on top in the end. So with that, Vice President, I conclude my report unless there are any questions.
Questions? All right, thank you, Superintendent. Karen, can we let you go first since you're online, and that way we make sure we get you?
Sure, I never get to go first. So I've been able to visit a few community councils out there, and it's been fantastic just to see the hard work. The community councils I visited were prior to distance learning, so I've got some set up coming in the next few weeks, so I'm gonna kind of be curious to ask how their distance learning experience was. But it's just cool to see so many good people involved and asking good questions, parents and teachers on those community councils. It's been a joy there. It was actually so fun to see, and Warren, I don't know that you picked up on it, but these recognitions earlier tonight with these teachers that had the resiliency award, I forget what it's called, but anyway, basically they were resilient through COVID and still had a lot of growth. The Robert Frost teachers, when they went up there was one of them who was wiping tears. And I could see, because I could actually see the front of her face instead of the back of her head where I usually sit. And it really struck me, because I thought, this is how much our teachers care. So to be able to give that teacher the recognition that she deserved, and to see the emotion come across her face for all those collective hours and hours of hard work and struggle through COVID years, and we're still in it, we're not out of it. It just really touched my heart that we have some really good teachers in Granite. We have fantastic teachers who care deeply. They're motivated by our kids. And when things get hard for them, they step up and do the work. So I just can't express enough thanks to teachers for making it through some really tough times. And I saw tonight how much it means to them to just have that recognition of their hard work. So even though we're not handing out certificates or awards to every teacher this evening, I just sincerely want to pass on my gratitude and the recognition that we do see your struggles. We hope you enjoyed the last Friday to have that extra time planned. We're trying to figure out small ways to show you our gratitude, but just know that I'm grateful for all you're doing. That's all I have.
Thanks, Karen. Terry?
Not much other than the JLC. I was here 2 weeks ago, and Clark and Chris and Nicole were there, and thank you for your support there. It was appreciated. Chris, thanks for taking my spot last week. It will be this Friday, 11 o'clock again, for those that might come. It's a good thing to learn good educational process. Thank you to all of our educators. By educators, anyone that works in education, no matter where you're at, thank you for what you do and the passion you have. And thank you, board, for letting me work with you. You're wonderful, and the superintendency and those that are here.
Thanks, Terry. Julie?
You and Julie. Even though she
I had a spectacular luncheon with Jessica Dunn, and she is the one who's in charge of our GEA. And I feel like we have such great leaders in our GEA, and I brag about our union and tell our teachers that when they have ideas and suggestions for us to tell their building representatives, because it will get back to us and we care, we listen to it. So appreciate our relationship. And I also had a great conversation with David Gomez, who's in charge of our equity department. And I feel so strongly about making sure that we're proactive about equity in our district. And I really appreciate his dedication and the vision that he's starting to grasp in his new job, and really support him. And I also wanted to tell you that I got to visit Granite Connect, which is where our students who need especially a lot of help to catch up on their credits in high school go to. Also, and by the way, can I say blown away by the energy of the teachers there. They, their kids walk in and they're just exhausted and they're like, no hope. Like this, look, there's no way I'm gonna finish. And those guys walk in there like, everybody like Superman, like this is gonna happen for you. And I felt like, gosh, I ought to be doing something better with my life when I ran. Like, what else can I do? They like were inspiring me. So really inspiring people over there. And I then walked over to Granite Peaks, and I was shocked. I had no idea. Granite Peaks graduates 3,700 people with a high school, with their high school equivalency every year. And that's more than any other high school. And I didn't know that. And looking at them and how they work things, I mean, they don't have the same real infrastructure that our other buildings do. Their funding is different and the way it all operates is different. And their teachers there are so dedicated and mostly not on contract. And which means they don't get paid as much, and they also don't get the same amount of hours, and they also don't get insurance or benefits. And so for them to be there doing the same job, I just was blown away by them, and really want to advocate for that program because I think it's so, so important that the students who aren't ready to graduate their senior year get an opportunity to graduate. And so anything that we can do to advocate for them, I think, is really well worth our effort.
Thanks, Julie. Connie?
I don't have anything other than thanks to all educators and what they do and the efforts, and grateful to the district that they provided the Friday and those kinds of things to support the educators and other people.
Thanks, Connie. Chris?
Okay, I just want to say I loved going to the GLC, the Joint Legislative Committee meetings, the last 2 Fridays. They are really, really informative, and they're very eye-opening of how much influence really our superintendents and school boards have on our legislature. I know several superintendents. I know Dr. Nye has talked about bills and done different, he works on, I think the all-day kindergarten one is what you're really working on. And I just appreciate that so much, that our top superintendency is so involved, and really it's eye-opening that we still have so many shortfalls in education with all their expertise. So anyway, just I really appreciated going to those meetings. So thanks, Terry, for going out of town so I could attend that. And I hope I can go to a few more. So that was really fun. And I hope that everyone is watching what's happening in our legislature and is involved and very vocal about what needs to happen to help our schools. So that's my hope. That's all.
Thanks, Chris. Clark?
I just want to say it feels like it's been an extremely busy start to the calendar year, with a lot of opportunities to visit schools and family engagement centers and network meetings and so forth. And so I appreciate either the invitations or the opportunity for me to invite myself to a lot of those types of functions and meetings and school events. And I hope to get to many, many more, because I think that's the most important place for us to all be. I'm also very cautious to ever infer any kind of patting ourselves on the back, but I want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be candid as a board member here, and I appreciate the professionalism that we have, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Clark. Ben would like to chime in something real fast.
Just real quick, you get these little packet of postcards. We've obviously been working diligently to better market our schools and highlight some of the good things that are happening through this open enrollment period. So we included all those that have participated with us. We've targeted some specific areas, as you could probably see from the postcards, and are expanding that opportunity now to the rest of our schools as a valuable resource. So just wanted you to have that information and see what that was about.
Thanks, Ben. People have said most everything, so. But it was really fun to be able to go to the JLC. I did get to do that because it was a distance learning day for us. And so it worked out that I could get to go, and I just popped out and went and took roll in my class and then came back in. So it was fun to be able to be there. I agree with you, Chris. You do learn a lot, and I appreciate the expertise that is in that room. It's almost overwhelming at times. I just want to give a shout out. Ben keeps legislative tracker. I believe it's Ben that does it, right? And that's such an invaluable tool. I think it's really great for us to be able to see what's going on. Ben, I didn't see that on the website. Is it posted somewhere?
Yeah, it should be on the homepage now.
Okay,
So we're a little behind. I noticed that was actually a certain somebody by the name of Martin Bates texted me and said, "Hey, where can I find that?" And I'm like, "Oh, dang. It's not on the website." So
we're grateful.
it's now, I'm surprised how many people outside of the district utilize that resource, but it should be on the homepage now if you want to refer people to it.
So I'd love to put a plug into that and share that with your constituency. It's a great way to be able to see the bills, especially that affect education, and where the various educational entities stand on that as well. So I want to give a huge thanks to our teachers for being able to make the pivot that they did as we went to distance learning. As a teacher that hates it because my subject matter does not translate well to online, first of all, it was a relief that it only lasted for a week. But I know and appreciate that teachers did a lot of work to get that transition to happen. And it was, I think it was a needed time, as you spoke to that about the subs that we need. I also want to I don't know who's listening or how many people are listening, but as we were talking about it with some community, we explained to them the reason why we are doing this, because we just can't get subs, and we have, 3 or 4 classes in an auditorium, and because we can't get coverage. And they said, well, gosh, I'll go in and sit with them if that's what it means. And I just want to encourage that. Go sign up as a sub because this is what's happening. And so if there's possibilities, just to let you know, you can sign up as an emergency sub. You can sign up to just sub for elementary. You can sign up just to sub for high school. And in spite of what Ben thinks, you can sign up just to sub for middle school, because middle school is the best place to be. Thank you. So just know that there are different possibilities and different scenarios. It's not just always you have to sign up as a sub and then that's it. So please sign up for a sub. And also, I appreciate what Clark said about he invited himself to some certain activities. I just want to encourage also our teachers and our administration to invite our elected officials. Just think about that, not just board members. We, of course, do encourage that, but I invited legislators to my concert in November, we had a combined concert, and it was great to be able to start to make some connections that way. So it's a valuable tool, and just would encourage that. For anybody who's interested, tomorrow Benyon Junior High School is hosting a Chinese New Year celebration, and 6:30 to 8. If you want to see a spectacular, they have a lion dance club team that performs 6:30 to 8 at Benyon Junior High. It's a pretty spectacular thing. Take kids, grandkids, whoever you have. And that is my report. And if that is it, I will entertain a motion for adjourning.
I motion we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for adjourning. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.